Her partner just got the promotion she applied for 2 years ago and didn't get. She threw him a dinner and meant every word of the toast, and hates the other things she felt underneath it.
Dear Mia.
Episode 4. Cheering with my teeth gritted.
Mia.
Before we start, one honest thing. I'm not a therapist, and nothing here is a substitute for one. What I am is someone who's spent years writing and living the long, unglamorous middle of marriages, the part after the wedding and before whatever comes next. So take this as one person's honest attempt at an answer, not a professional prescription. Let's get into today's letter.
Dear Mia.
I've never said any of this out loud to anyone, not even my sister, who I tell everything. My partner just got promoted to a role I actually applied for at my own company 2 years ago and didn't get. Different companies, same title, and somehow that makes it worse, not better, like the universe is running a controlled experiment on me specifically. He's genuinely thrilled, and he should be. He worked hard for it, and I threw him a small dinner and meant every bit of the congratulations. But there's this other feeling underneath that I am deeply ashamed of, that shows up when he mentions the new salary, or when his parents call to say how proud they are, or when he casually says something like, "We should think about a bigger place now," as if his career is the one that gets to reshape both our lives. I love him. I'm not competing with him, exactly, or I don't want to be. But some nights I lie there doing math on my own stalled career and feeling like the smaller half of the marriage, and then I feel disgusting for feeling that, because he has never once made me feel small on purpose. He asked me last week, so gently, if something was wrong, and I told him I was just tired, which felt like the first real lie I've told him in years, and I hated how easily it came out. I don't know how to want good things for him without also wanting them for myself, so badly it curdles. I want to start with the word you used, curdles, because it's exactly right, and it's also the key to this whole letter. Milk doesn't curdle because it goes bad on its own. It curdles because something acidic gets introduced into it. Your love for him isn't the problem, and it hasn't gone bad. Something else got introduced, comparison mostly, and maybe fear underneath that, and it's souring something that was fine on its own. That distinction matters, because it means you're not dealing with a marriage problem first. You're dealing with a you problem that's leaking into the marriage, and those get treated very differently. I want to sit with that image a moment longer, because I think it's more useful than it first appears. Curdled milk isn't ruined milk in the sense of being fundamentally different. It's the same milk, with its structure disrupted by something introduced from outside it. You can uncurdle it by trying harder to love him, the way you might be tempted to, because the love was never the part that broke. Trying to fix curdled milk by adding more milk doesn't work. You have to deal with the acid. In your case, the acid isn't one thing, it's actually two things braided together, and separating them is most of the work ahead of you. One strand is comparison, the simple, human, unavoidable act of measuring your position against someone standing right next to you, which nearly everyone does whether they admit it or not. The other strand is fear, quieter and less examined. Fear that if his trajectory keeps rising while yours stays flat, something about the balance of the marriage itself will shift in a direction you don't get a vote in. Comparison alone is uncomfortable but survivable. Fear left unexamined is the part that tends to curdle things permanently, because fear doesn't stay still. It looks for confirmation everywhere, in a bigger place comment, in a proud phone call from his parents, in a salary you weren't asking about. Here's what I don't think you need to hear, so I'll get it out of the way. You don't need someone to tell you jealousy is normal, or that plenty of people feel this in long relationships, or that it doesn't make you a bad partner. All of that is true, and none of it will help you at 11 at night doing salary math you hate yourself for doing. What actually helps is being precise about what the feeling is made of, because "I'm jealous of my husband" is too blunt an instrument to do anything with. It flattens a complicated, layered feeling into a single ugly word, and then asks you to feel bad about the word instead of understanding the layers underneath it.
Yours isn't really about him.
You told me yourself, same title, different company, the job you applied for and didn't get. This isn't envy of his success in the abstract. It's grief for your own path, wearing his promotion as a costume, because his win happened to walk in wearing the exact shape of your loss. I think it's worth being very precise about why that particular shape matters so much, because I don't think it would hit nearly as hard if the details lined up less exactly. If he'd been promoted at an entirely different kind of job, in an entirely different field, you might feel a general, diffuse envy of his good fortune, the kind most people can shrug off within a week. But same title, different company, the exact role you applied for and didn't get, that's not a general reminder that good things happen to other people. That's a specific, almost surgical reminder of your own particular rejection, delivered by the person you love most, at the exact moment he's most deserving of your uncomplicated joy. Of course it curdles. You're not being asked to feel one simple feeling here. You're being asked to celebrate a near-exact replica of the thing that hurt you 2 years ago, arriving with someone else's name on it, and expecting yourself to feel nothing but pride about that is expecting something almost nobody could actually deliver. That reframe matters because it changes what you're actually allowed to be sad about. You're allowed to grieve not getting that role 2 years ago. You're allowed to be honestly unsatisfied with where your own career sits right now, independent of him entirely. That would be true whether he'd been promoted or not. You've just been able to not look directly at it until his life handed you a mirror with his face on it. What you're not obligated to do is pretend the grief isn't there because it's inconvenient timing, or punish yourself for a feeling that's actually pointing you towards something real and useful. You have unfinished business with your own ambition, and it's been sitting quietly until this month made it loud. I also want to address the shame directly, because you used the word disgusting, and I don't think you should be carrying that much weight over this. Wanting good things for someone you love while also aching over your own stalled version of the same thing isn't a character flaw. It's just what it feels like to be a person with your own ambitions standing next to someone you love who's currently winning. The two feelings aren't in competition inside you the way you think they are. The love is real, the ache is real, and neither one disqualifies the other. The same way being thrilled for a friend's pregnancy doesn't disqualify your own private grief if you've been struggling to conceive, or being proud of a sibling's house doesn't disqualify your own frustration with renting. Adult life is full of these double occupancy feelings, and the discomfort of holding two at once is not a sign anything's wrong with you. What actually would concern me is if you felt nothing at all watching a life you want to happen to someone standing that close to you. Numbness, there would be the stranger reaction, not the grief. Plenty of people quietly go numb in exactly this situation, deciding it's safer to stop wanting anything for themselves than to keep feeling the gap, and that numbness tends to be far harder to recover from than an ache you're at least still willing to look directly at. The shame you're describing isn't proof you're a bad partner. It's proof you're holding two true things at once, and haven't yet given yourself permission to hold them without judging one of them as the ugly one. I also want to say something about the specific fact that you haven't told even your sister, who you tell everything. That detail tells me the shame isn't abstract for you, it's load-bearing. You've built an actual wall around this feeling, strong enough to hold even against your closest confidant, which means you've been carrying it entirely alone for however long it's been building. That's a heavier weight than the jealousy itself. Jealousy shared with even one trusted person tends to shrink almost immediately, not because talking about it solves anything practically, but because shame specifically requires secrecy to survive at full strength, and it weakens considerably the moment it's spoken out loud to someone who won't use it against you. I gently suggest telling your sister, not because she'll fix anything, but because the version of this feeling you're carrying entirely alone, at 11 at night, doing math nobody else can see, is almost always heavier than the version you've said out loud to even one safe person. There's also a subtler trap in here worth naming. The danger isn't really that you feel jealous. It's what jealousy left unexamined tends to do over time, which is curdle your word into something quieter and more corrosive, like flinching slightly every time he shares good news, or finding small ways to withhold enthusiasm you don't even notice yourself withholding, or letting a private ache slowly become a low hum of resentment that outlives the original feeling entirely. That's the actual risk here, not the jealousy itself. which is honest and survivable. But what happens if it stays wordless for another year while his career keeps moving and yours stays exactly where it is in your telling of it? I've watched this specific pattern play out at a distance, in couples I've known over the years, and it tends to follow a fairly predictable arc when it's left alone rather than addressed early. It starts exactly where you are, a private ache, dutifully hidden, real congratulations still offered and meant. Then, months in, the withholding starts, almost never on purpose, a slightly shorter reaction to good news, a joke with a little more edge in it than intended, a must be nice that slips out before it can be caught, small enough each time to explain away, large enough in aggregate that the other person starts to feel it without being able to name what changed. By the time it's openly acknowledged, usually after an argument that appears to be about something else entirely, a schedule, a purchase, whose parents to visit for the holidays, both people are often surprised to discover how long the real feeling had been sitting there, disguised as something else. I tell you this not to frighten you, but because you're currently standing at the exact point in that arc where naming it costs the least and does the most good. Every month it goes unnamed, the cost of finally saying it goes up a little, and the shape it takes when it finally does come out tends to get uglier the longer it's postponed. So, practically, first, separate the two conversations you're currently having as one. There's the conversation about your career, which is yours to have with yourself, maybe with a mentor, maybe with a therapist who isn't me. What do you actually want next, and what's been stalling it? Because stalled is doing a lot of work in your letter, and I don't think you've unpacked it yet. And then there's the conversation with him, which is smaller and more specific than it feels right now, not, "I'm jealous of you," which will make him flinch and try to shrink himself, which helps no one, but something closer to, "Your promotion brought up some hard feelings about my own career that aren't your fault, and I need you to know they're there, and I need a little room to work through them without you tiptoeing or over-celebrating around me." Let him be excited about his life. Let yourself be honest about wanting more from yours. Those two things can sit in the same house, without one having to shrink so the other fits. When you do have that conversation with him, I'd resist the urge to over-explain or apologize your way through it, which is a common instinct when the feeling itself already carries shame. You don't need to justify why you feel this way before you're allowed to say it. A short, clear statement, said once and let sit, tends to land better than a long, hedged one that sounds like you're trying to talk yourself out of the feeling even as you're describing it to him. Say the true thing plainly, let there be a slightly uncomfortable pause afterward if there is one, and resist filling that pause with backpedaling. He can handle more directness than you might expect, and a man who's just been promoted into a role he worked hard for is very often more emotionally available in that stretch. Not less because he's not currently defending anything, he's just living in a good week. That's actually a reasonable window to have this conversation in, not despite his good news, but partly because of it. He has more slack right now to hold space for something that isn't about him. And the bigger place comment, say something about that specifically soon before it calcifies into a pattern. Not because he's doing anything wrong by dreaming out loud, but because if the shape of your shared future keeps getting drawn around his trajectory by default, the resentment won't stay curdled milk. It'll become the whole meal. Ask to be an equal author of what comes next, salary math aside. That's a completely different request than asking him to earn less, or want less, or feel less proud. You're not trying to shrink his win. You're trying to make sure your own name is still on the next page. Here's a concrete way to make that request land as collaboration instead of complaint. Instead of reacting to the bigger place comment in the moment, which tends to come out sharper than intended because you're reacting rather than choosing, bring it up separately later as its own conversation. Something like, "I noticed you've started talking about our future in terms of what your new role makes possible, and I want us to make those decisions together, factoring in where I want to go too, not just what your trajectory can now afford." That framing does two things at once. It tells him the pattern without accusing him of a specific bad intention, because I doubt he's doing this with any awareness at all. Most people in his position wouldn't be. And it puts you back in the room as a co-author of the next chapter, rather than someone reacting from the sidelines to decisions that have already started forming without you. I'd also watch for a specific trap that catches a lot of people in your position, which is deciding that the fix is to want less, to quietly talk yourself out of your own ambitions so the gap stops hurting, to decide the corner office or the promotion or whatever it was never really mattered that much to you anyway. Be suspicious of that thought if it shows up, because it's not peace, it's a smaller version of the same curdling, just pointed inward instead of outward. Wanting less isn't the same as healing. It's just quiet or losing. The goal isn't to want less than him, so the comparison stops. It's to build a life where your wanting has somewhere real to go, whether or not it ever runs parallel to his. And if it turns out, after some honest looking, that what you actually want has quietly shifted since you applied for that role 2 years ago, that you genuinely rather have more time than more title now, that's a legitimate answer too, but it has to be one you arrive at on purpose, not one you back into because it hurts less than wanting something you're not currently getting. Give yourself a real, honest look at the question before you settle for the version of the answer that happens to be the least painful one to sit with right now. One way to test whether you're genuinely reprioritizing or quietly settling is to ask yourself how the thought arrives. Genuine reprioritizing tends to feel calm and a little relieving when you sit with it, an actual, oh, that's not what I want anymore. And that's fine, that holds up even on a good day, when you're not currently smarting from a comparison. Settling tends to arrive specifically in the moments when the ache is loudest, right after his good news, right after the salary math, and it tends to have a slightly defensive, self-soothing quality to it, more like a story you're telling yourself to make the hurting stop than a conclusion you've actually reached. If the thought, maybe I don't really want that anymore, only ever shows up on the hard nights and never on the ordinary ones, that's worth noticing. It's probably not an honest recalibration. It's the ache wearing a disguise. One last thing, because I think it matters more than it looks like it does. Go do something concrete about your own career this month, something small and real, not as a performance for him or a distraction from the feeling, but because you named it as stalled and stalled things don't move on their own. Update the resume you haven't touched. Reach out to the person you've been meaning to reach out to. Apply for the thing that scares you a little. Not because it'll erase the jealousy overnight. It won't. And expecting it will just add a new layer of disappointment on top of the old one. But because right now the feeling has nowhere to go except sideways, into comparison and salary math and lying awake doing arithmetic on someone else's win, which is a slow, quiet way of spending years without ever actually addressing the thing underneath it. Give it somewhere forward to go instead. 6 months from now, I'd rather you telling me you tried something and it didn't work than telling me you're still lying there each night doing the same math on the same unchanged numbers. And stop lying to him about being just tired, if you can manage it, even in small increments. I understand exactly why the lie came out so easily. It's smaller than the truth, and smaller felt safer in the moment. But every time you hand him tired instead of what's actually happening, you're quietly telling yourself the real feeling isn't safe to bring into the marriage, and that belief, repeated enough times, is exactly what turns an honest ache into the kind of curdled, corrosive resentment we talked about earlier. You don't have to deliver the whole truth all at once. But the next time he asks if something's wrong, you might try, something is, and I'm not ready to talk about all of it yet, but I will be soon, which is still true, still protects you, and doesn't require you to build the wall any higher than it already is. That's this week's letter.
I'm Mia. Talk soon.